Hospital Porter's Pride and Dignity, Stop the New World Order, welcome to Oumuamua TV, and a very happy new year to all Oumuamua TV viewers. It's right, that's right, it's now 2019, a whole new year has emerged, a whole new year has come, another year has passed, and we have the first in this series, UFO Disclosure 2019. Maybe this year is the title for this particular video, and well, maybe this year will be the year of disclosure. Now, when I first started my UFO disclosure videos, it was 2015, and I asked the question: could 2015 be the year of disclosure? And of course, it wasn't. So I asked the question: could 2016 be the year of disclosure? And it wasn't. Nor was 2017, and neither has the year just gone. 2018, and of course, the question inevitably emerges. It's a reasonable question that people are asking me. Ben, is it possible that no year will be the year of disclosure and it will never happen? The answer to that question is yes, and I've talked on previous videos in this series, in my UFO Disclosure series, whatever the year it might be, about my own conflicting feelings about that question. But it could be that if something comes up, something happens which gives us reason to think it might be possible, then it behooves us to actually address it. Because if we're wrong, if it turns out we're wrong, it turns out that if we say, oh no, it's not going to happen, there's never going to be any disclosure, blah. If we do that, then in a sense it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, and also we'll be kicking ourselves. We never miss the opportunity to address it and be a part of the process. So therefore, if something happens which gives me reason to think that maybe this year will be different, I'm going to talk about it, and I'm going to do so without any apologies. And that basically is what this video is about. So let's just go through some of the issues at stake in this, under this particular question: could 2019 be the year of UFO disclosure? Well, let me begin by saying, if you are interested in UFOs and crash retrievals and aliens and exopolitics and Area 51 and Roswell and all these other things, then I can't do more than recommend my new book, Roswell Redeemed Humanity After Disclosure, as long as you remember to read the first two, because it is the final part of a trilogy. It's a fictional story, but it is symbolic and analogous and allegorical to everything that goes into these things, the way that George Orwell and Graham Hancock did when he wrote his books, his fiction. So I really do think, even if you didn't buy anyone this for Christmas, you might, if you've got any money left over, you could pop out and get them this as a New Year's present. So shameless plug over. And now we come on to something that was literally the biggest news just about a year ago, or just over. And that was the emergence, the publication of information about the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, ATIP, although that might stand for something else, and I'll come to that in a minute. But what happened was, it was all broke by the New York Times in December. I remember it very well. We all remember where we were, yeah, because that was actually that was the biggest story in ufology at the time, and I remember everyone was focusing on this, and this was just over a year ago, like I said, and I covered it in the UFO Disclosure series I was doing then, which basically the last one before the one where I resumed it to when I talked about the Larry Warren situation in September. That was UFO Disclosure 2018, the second one. But this basically was revealed that the US government had a UFO research program running from 2007 to 2012. This was interesting because they claimed that they stopped investigating UFOs because there's basically nothing here to see move along in 1969 with the closure of Project Blue Book. Project Blue Book was the last of a series of investigations they carried out since the late 1940s. Now, they said, well, basically, there's nothing here. It's just all mistaken identity. We've checked it scientifically. Nothing to see here at all. Well, basically, they've admitted that they lied. And what's more, in the White House petition, the second White House petition by Grant Cameron, they said that they restated that they had not had any interest since 1969 in UFOs. And then they come out with this. They had this ATIP running from 2007 to 2012.
The project was run by Harry Reid, a senator from Nevada, which is home to Area 51, and had an annual budget of £15 million, which is a lot of money to spend on something that doesn't exist. They had this sort of cover story that they were interested in aviation technology by China and Russia, and thought UFO reports might lead to some clues, which is basically the same line they used before. There was some idea that they could justify the expense of the previous UFO research project by saying they were spying on experimental Soviet aircraft. The thing about it is, you don't need a separate organisation for that, because they already have the CIA, NSA, and all the other three-letter agencies with their spy satellites. Why do you need a separate UFO organisation for tracking these aircraft? Now, I remember where I was. We all remember where we were, as the saying goes. I was at the Basis Project recording, it was actually captured at the time, and the New York Times broke the story. However, it was mentioned in October when there was a radio show which had two ufologists on it, Cheryl Costa and Leslie Kane, and they were joined on the air by Luis Elizondo, who was a former Department of Defense official who supposedly was involved with ATIP. And after that, a video was released from 2004, supposedly filmed by a US Navy fighter jet, showing a strange object in the sky, and you can hear one of the pilots talking. And indeed, the pilot, Commander David Fravor, spoke on the media about his experience, and it's really quite something. Even Nick Pope was extraordinarily candid, saying the take-home message is here. There's probably something out there, but we don't know what it is, because the media, of course, have to ask Nick Pope, don't they? They just have to. So this was really quite remarkable, a really remarkable instance. But then, as time went on, question marks started to rise. For example, the To the Stars Academy was formed by Tom DeLonge, who's a rock star with Blink-182, the famous band. And he's formed this To the Stars Academy. And they had a massive press conference, not unlike the press conference which Dr. Stephen Greer organised in 2001. It was fairly similar to that. Big media event. Lots of experts came on stage. As I said at the time, I was a bit concerned about some of the characters that were involved in this, not least Hal Puthoff. But it seemed so hopeful, didn't it? It seemed so hopeful. But then, as time wore on, question marks began to grow. Now, I do recommend listening to this. Now, this is an episode of a UFO-style radio show. Now, I do listen to other people's UFO-style radio shows as well as my own. And, of course, there's a YouTube channel that goes with this too, so that this is a bit like what I do. But it's Somewhere in the Skies, and the presenter is Ryan Sprague, and he's got a lot of good stuff on there. It's a good show, similar to myself in many ways. And in Programme 86, he has on John Greenwald, who is well known as the guy behind The Black Vault. If you ever watch his programmes and his interviews, they're very, very good. Again, it's pretty similar stuff to what I and Ryan Sprague both cover. But in this particular programme, Programme 86, the question goes up, is the To the Stars Academy for real? That's the question. And John Greenwald, he's quite an interesting character. I mean, I think he makes some mistakes. I think he's wrong about Bob Lazar. He thinks he's suspicious of Bob Lazar, and I think he's made some conclusions I think that might be wrong. I think Bob Lazar is telling the truth about some things that Greenwald's not so sure. But anyway, the point is, he goes into the background of government UFO research, Blue Book, Project Grudge, Project Sign, etc. And then he talks about ATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. And what he did was, like he always does, is he started sending off Freedom of Information Act requests to find out everything he could about this particular organisation, because it had been public. It had been all over the New York Times. And it turns out that he could find very, very little. I mean, he went to the Department of Defense, which is where Luis Elizondo comes from, and it turns out they said they had no records of any such organisation. So he phoned them up, and he spoke to an official at the Pentagon, and the official told him that ATIP existed, but it actually stood for Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program, not aerospace. Now, you may think it's sort of nitpicking to get one word wrong, but I mean, they're very precise, these people. They're very precise, these sort of military intelligence people. They're very about what things are, what things mean, and what words mean. They always are. So Luis Elizondo said it wrong. The New York Times reported it wrong. Now, according to the Pentagon, the ATIP with aviation in its name was a project by the Defense Intelligence Agency. Now, this is is actually associated. It's actually one of the subordinate organisations of the Department of Defense. So, to be fair, that could explain it. But however, Elizondo was not part of the DIA officially. He was with the DoD, Department of Defense. So he was, in a sense, he was part of the core organisation rather than one of these subsidiaries. And it did say that ATIP, this person at the Pentagon did say that ATIP was specifically DIA, Defense Intelligence Agencies. Now, one thing that Greenwald has said, and indeed Sprague was talking about this too, is that it all started off with a bang. The big press conference, these very impressive videos coming out from the US Navy, and everyone thought this has got to accelerate, this has got to go further, but it has stagnated. There's no doubt about it. I mean, we've had odd updates, we've had interviews on Joe Rogan with various people, Tom DeLonge, and there's been some publicity, there's been some release, there's been some literature. I get an email from them every so often because I'm on their email list, but there's nothing revolutionary in there. There's lots of advertisements for merchandise, of course, but there's nothing really that I'd say. I think I would say is a kind of continuation from what was promised. It feels like an anticlimax, if you know what I mean. It really just feels like it started off with this tremendous explosion of possibility, and it hasn't delivered. It just has failed to. It's failed to continue. It's failed to carry on with the momentum that it built. And since then, Greenwald has discovered some more rather disturbing information about this, which makes you question what's really going on. For example, there was always this idea that the first two videos, the Tic Tac footage, etc., was actually a part of this. It was actually a part of the. It was all a big part of. Something bigger was going to come, but nothing ever did. The Tic Tac footage was supposed to be a preliminary for much more was to come. There was going to be some more. There was going to be some more videos, etc., more information, more files, but it hasn't happened. Well, at least it hasn't happened yet. And they'll say, well, you haven't done it yet, but it's been over a year now. Also, there was Greenwald actually managed to get in touch with the Department of Defense, and they claimed that these videos were not declassified by them. The question then goes out, well, how did these videos fall into the hands of Luis Elizondo and Tom DeLonge? Because apparently there were no chain of custody documents for program releases. Now, whenever these things happen, there's always a chain of custody in these official documentations and things like that. And this happened at my hospital. I had to, especially if I was dealing with something of a criminal matter, where there was a criminal case involved in the hospital, for example, someone who'd been murdered or injured, and a policeman had to go with us when I was portering. A policeman had to go with us, whatever we were doing, were associated with this case, like moving the patient, etc. We would have to give our names and show our identity badges, because that counted as a chain of custody, to say that the person, whether it was a corpse or whether it was an injured person or whether it was a piece of evidence, had been in the custody of certain people, like members of staff at the hospital. And the same goes for these particular documents. Now, that didn't happen. Greenwald said that the DoD had no chain of custody connected with these particular videos and the other documents, these pages of documents that were handed over to the TTSA through Luis Elizondo and Tom DeLonge. What's more, the chain of custody documents were classified. According to the Department of Defense, they were exempt from FOIA because they contained information that was of a sensitive nature. Now, the TTSA always claimed that they have these chain of custody documents, but if the DoD said they never had any, how did they get them, or are they lying? That's the question. There's also no reference to Luis Elizondo in any of the emails which Greenwald got from the Department of Defense between himself and Secretary of Defense James Mattis. There was even the resignation letter, which Elizondo published as an open letter, is actually not available through the FOIA, which is strange. the DIA make all kinds of claims. They claim that the ATIP was not a UFO program. I mean, that's to be expected. That's not itself a smoking gun. But there are many other smoking guns and red flags. For example, I mean, when I saw the press conference, I immediately the alarm bells started ringing because they put up the famous Eccles photo. Now, Steve Mera has talked about this, and in fact, Steve Mera was on Jimmy Church's show saying about this, saying that was a photograph that was known to be explained. It was actually a cluster of mylar balloons. This is the famous Eccles UFO photograph. That was from Greater Manchester, and Steve, he runs the organisation in the area which actually investigated that. So the thing is, they knew that because they've been told. Many people told DeLonge and Elizondo that's not a UFO there. That's mylar balloons. But they still went onto this press conference and they put it up there as something real. Now that is a concern. It really is. Now, so who's to blame here? I mean, I don't know. I mean, Tom DeLonge, I think, is genuine, and as does Greenwald. And I knew this actually beforehand when he first came onto the scene, because I'd already heard about his name in association with UFOs, because he runs a bookshop. He has a bookshop in Los Angeles, California, USA, and it contains his books that he wrote of a UFO nature, but also other people's as well. It's kind of like a UFO conspiratorial, spiritual, paranormal bookshop, and he basically takes time out to run this bookshop, and it's like you can see that someone who does that would only do it if they had a genuine belief. And I know someone actually who lives in the area and actually went to the bookshop and had a look around, and he says it's a really great place. So if Tom DeLonge is genuine, then is he being used to promote false information? If so, why? Now, there's a public thing called Intellipedia, which you can actually get. I don't know how exactly you get hold of it, but it's not classified. You can actually get it through the FOIA, I think, and it has a list of various organisations within the government relating to things such as aviation intelligence and stuff like this. ATIP is not mentioned. Is only mentioned once. Sorry, it's mentioned once, and only in its aviation form, not aerospace, and that is also strange. So, and I also went to see the Rich Planet show, and Richard has also made some interesting claims about the To the Stars Academy, which I go along with, and he's had Peter Hyatt analyse some of the things that Elizondo has said and talked about, the kind of language he uses, which indicates he displays something awkward. Now, as I will be saying in the future, now I'm not going to go into details now, but this is going to come up again. I have a very strong feeling. The testimony of Peter Hyatt alone is not enough for a conviction, legally, or I think intellectually. However, it's the reason we should be suspicious when you add it on to the other evidence that has been tabled. And the very fact that it's just the whole thing seems to have fallen apart. I don't know if fallen apart is the right word. It's just ground to a halt after an astonishingly. There's an astonishing burst of speed at the beginning, and it's just sort of like it's just gradually slowed down. It's stopping. It's dragging its heels, and basically people just don't talk about it anymore. So if it's fake, why is it fake? Who faked it, and for what purpose? That's the question. And well, if it is fake, then why are they faking it to do with UFOs? Why are they putting out fake UFO information out there? I don't go along with the Mark Pilkington line, as I said before, that it's just a cover story to launder their down-to-earth intelligence operations, and UFOs are basically a modern myth which is created to confuse and distract from more terrestrial secrets such as spy planes and things like that. I don't go along with this idea that Mark Pilkington talks about, which is actually a very fashionable idea at the moment, but there's many holes in it. To draw someone's attention towards something with the ultimate objective of deflecting it away is an enormous, very, very risky gambit, and it could backfire in any number of ways. It's rather like if you have a big room, like a village hall or something, and you've hidden a diamond underneath the floorboards in the corner by the piano. Okay, so you're at the other end, you're up by the tea stall, and all these people are coming in, and you know they're after the diamond. So, they've been looking all over town for the diamond. So there's several different ways you could handle it. You could just keep quiet and pretend nothing's there, which is what I would do, or you can jump up onto the stage and go over to where the speakers are and say, "Excuse me, everybody, there's a diamond buried underneath where I'm standing." Of course, that's not true. There is no diamond there, but it could easily draw attention to where the diamond really is. Do you see what I mean? That's an analogy I came up with. So I don't think that's the answer. I don't think it's the answer at all. There's something more going on, and it's probably something to do with real UFOs rather than it's just the Aurora spy plane or something. But I can't quite work out exactly what point they're trying to make and what they hope to achieve with this. If it is fake, if it is real, then why all these discrepancies that Mr. Greenwald has discovered, and why is it just all gone sort of quiet? Not completely quiet. They're just paying lip service in terms of publicity now. There's none of this greater and greater acceleration that we were all hoping for. I mean, a lot of people say, this is the prelude to real disclosure. A lot of people were saying this a year ago. It was a very heady time. It was really hopeful, and that hope is now gone. So, what's it all about? Now, one thing I have no doubt about is that there is some truth behind the footage. I mean, this is undeniable, and there's so much of the videos and things like that, and there's the fact that the guy was allowed to speak and stuff like that. I mean, even the skeptics say, "Oh, it was just some kind of strange bird or something." I mean, there's nobody, I think, is trying to dispute that somehow the entire video record that TTSA got hold of, that is the Tic Tac footage, the gimbal footage, was somehow concocted, completely fabricated. There is some reality behind it. Now, this is a very, very good little short movie. It's like it's CGI, but it's very, very sophisticated CGI. I mean, it looks. When I first saw it, I actually thought they'd actually somehow managed to get aircraft and film them. But it's a short dramatization based on the Nimitz encounters, as they're called. That is the incident in which those films were taken, where these these fighter jets from the USS Nimitz aircraft carrier encountered these strange objects, and it's really, really good. You can get it on YouTube. Just Google Nimitz encounters on YouTube and you'll find it, and I really do recommend it. It's a good way of illustrating the actual experience in your mind, especially if you're not familiar with the workings of US Navy aviation, because when Fravor and a couple of other people were interviewed about this, they use a lot of jargon. It's hard to understand. But this video, I think, it's just a short film. It illustrates the whole thing very well indeed. So this is an excellent film by David C. Beatty. So do check that out. Well, it looks like there is going to be a documentary about the whole issue to do with the TTSA and Luis Elizondo. And this here is a poster about it from MUFON TV. Nothing to Hide, a new film from Ron James of MUFON TV. Something really big is about to happen. And there we see, I think there's somebody there. I think that might be Ron himself, the director. I've not met Ron, I don't know what he looks like. But the man he's sitting next to is Luis Elizondo, former Department of Defense official. And I will watch this, certainly. It's something big is about to happen. That's really, really great, because as I said previously, this time last year, it did appear as if something big was about to happen. The whole TTSA, Tom DeLonge, Luis Elizondo, and the Nimitz footage and things like that was so fertile, or appeared to be so fertile, that everyone was so excited. And as I said, it just seems to have not delivered what it promised. But this is actually a much more recent poster I've just found. It's just a couple of months old. If I could be persuaded otherwise, I will be. I mean, I don't necessarily go along with everything that, say, Richard D. Hall and John Greenwald have said. They might be wrong. I hope they are. Then again, they might be right. I hope not. But either way, I'll accept that. But I'll definitely be watching this. Now, I'm sure most of you have heard of this, and I have heard of it, but I've only recently had a good look at it, because because basically I've been writing my book, which has sort of shut me off from the world for quite a long time. But we actually have a TV series called Project Blue Book, and this is a pretty amazing thing that this has happened. It really is. It's a TV series on the History Channel. As you know, History Channel has an awful lot of fictionalizations, which are rather like my own books, of course. And this is a really interesting looking one about the famous Project Blue Book, which of course was, until ATIP was released, the last ever official UFO investigation by the US government, which officially ended in 1969. But of course, we found out more recently it's carried on in other ways, even if it turns out there's something a bit suspicious about some of the things that have been said about it. Now, this is quite a star-studded kind of cast. I mean, there's a guy, Aidan Gillen, who's been in a couple of kind of like comic book movies. He's playing J. Allen Hynek, the famous UFO investigator for the US Air Force. He started off as a skeptic and became a believer. So he's very. So it's obviously like they've managed to get hold of a big mainstream actor to play the lead role. Also, the executive producer is Robert Zemeckis, who was actually a very, very famous director for quite a long time, who came out with such famous films as Back to the Future and Forrest Gump. So that's another really pretty big thing that's going on. Yeah, I mean, I've really got to look out of this, man, because it covers all sorts of things such as the Flatwoods Monster and things like that, and it looks like there's going to be some really interesting footage. I've had to look at the trailer, which I won't play you because you know the reason why. And well, it may be good, it may be bad. We won't know until we've seen it, but I can't wait to see it. I really can't. And it is beginning on January the 8th, just 1 week away. Now, something else has happened, which I think should give us hope for this coming year. And not in the way you might think, right? Because I know some of you are going to jump the gun and say, Ben, no, you're wrong. Okay. This mysterious blue light that appeared above New York City, USA. There was bright. It's very, very strange. 9 p.m. Thursday night in New York City, which is like the early hours of the morning for here. The sky above the city began to fluoresce with a mysterious bright blue light, and there's a huge amount of amateur footage of this incident. You can see many people got out and filmed it. Obviously, it's a huge, highly populous area, huge city. And also, predictably, because this is the United States, some people wondered if it was the rapture and God was about to ascend them into heaven. You know, the Americans, you know, they're like that. Now, the media immediately released a report that the blue glow was caused by an explosion at an electrical power plant, which is in Queens, which is one of the boroughs of the city. An accident with a transformer caused it to catch fire and release bright blue electrical arcs, which were reflected by the low clouds that covered the sky at that time. Nobody was hurt in the fire. Excuse me. But the entire plant had to be shut down, leaving thousands of people in New York without electricity for the Christmas holiday. LaGuardia, which is a big airport nearby, had to switch to emergency power, and numerous flights were cancelled or diverted. And this has caused a Gatwick-style chaos in the post-Christmas and pre-New Year weekend in that airport. You know, people camping under Christmas trees. You've seen it all before, as I've covered in previous videos. Now, this is going to surprise you and perhaps disappoint you or impress you, depending on your point of view. But I don't. There have been a few videos circulating that claimed that the cause of the blue light above New York City was actually a UFO. And people who read Panmo Voice will know about this because I have covered it there. I did write about it on New Year's Eve. The power station accident was faked or possibly staged to cover up UFOs. Now, before we go any further, based on the huge number of other videos from the thousands of witnesses on the ground, including people who were close to the power station and filmed the actual fire, I'm certain that these UFO images were manipulated, and I see no reason at the moment to disbelieve the official story. The power station affected was the Astoria plant, which is run by a company called Consolidated Edison Inc. Its website is down at the moment partly, but that doesn't mean it's hiding anything. And so let me get that straight. Now you might think, well, why are you bringing this up now, Ben? If you think you believe the official story, there was no UFO in the New York Light, then why are you bringing it up now? Well, why should I explain? The boys of the NYPD choir were singing Galway Bay, and then they started tweeting about aliens. It's alright, you can take your fingers out of your ears now. Now, it's true, the New York Police Department, which were dealing with this, of course, did actually make a little release here. They did say something public and official, which is very interesting. This is their Twitter account, NYPD News, at NYPD News. Confirming incident in Astoria was the result of transformer explosion. No injuries, no fire, no evidence of extraterrestrial activity. Please continue to follow at FDNY and Con Edison. At Con Edison, that's interesting, isn't it? I got 4,851 likes, 1,975 impressions. Now that's interesting, isn't it? Very, very interesting indeed, I would say. It's an extraordinary document, that tweet, seeing as it came from an official source, the New York Police Department, official public service. And it was on the subject, and it's included this very odd reassurance: no evidence of extraterrestrial activity. Now that is very significant, not because there really was extraterrestrial activity. I repeat, I believe the official story. It was a big explosion at the power station, a big electrical blast, basically, an arc. But because the notion is now so accepted in the forefront of people's minds that the authorities feel compelled to mention it, in the face of ridicule from other authorities, no doubt. This is how prevalent the idea, the concept of aliens now, is so popular. I mean, they said no evidence of extraterrestrial activity. I mean, why didn't that go without saying? It doesn't go without saying anymore. You see what I mean? Isn't that odd? Now, as I was explaining, I don't think UFOs don't come into it, in my view, but I still think that the very fact that people are thinking UFOs and talking UFOs is highly significant. Now, I don't want you guys to get me wrong, on the other hand. Despite what I've said, and I watched Secure Team 10's video about this, and I think they were making the reason there was a difference in the night sky caused by other electrical blasts is the amount of cloud cover. But despite all this, I know strange lights do sometimes appear in the sky where there is no obvious explanation for it, and that happened in Oxfordshire a few months ago. This is near where I live, and I did cover this at the time. Now, I don't know what causes incidents like this. It could be something to do with UFOs, indeed, or maybe HAARP, chemtrails, Project Bluebeam, or the effect of cosmic radiation or the Earth's magnetic field. This particular event that you can see here was a photograph taken by somebody else, somebody I know, in a town called Bicester, which is north of Oxford City in Oxfordshire. And very, very strange situation. I didn't witness it myself. It was not visible from the city. It was visible from the north and eastern part of Oxfordshire. There's all kinds of explanations were put out for it. An aircraft coming into land at RAF Bryce Norton, even though no aircraft engines were heard, and landing lights are bright white, not blue normally. The filtering effect of the cloud, etc., with lights from a train. All kinds of explanations were suggested for it. But no, I don't think those explanations hold water. I am not about to turn total skeptic on you. Have no fear. And now we have an update on the Oumuamua situation. This is a very, very significant update, I would say. In fact, I would go as far as to say as this Oumuamua is probably the biggest UFO stroke extraterrestrial life SETI story of 2018. It really, really is. Now, I'm not going to repeat what I said in the video I made about this, which was a live stream, and I'll put a link in the description box to that. I must not forget to do that because it's very, very important. And I've just made a note to do that. Thank goodness for the pause button. Yeah, this really has turned out to be one of these really exceptionally interesting events. And for the reasons I explained in the live stream, the fact that this interstellar object, this first confirmed interstellar object, actually approached the solar system, and it had several strange properties which I talked about in the live stream. Firstly, it was moving very quickly. It had a very odd rotation. It was rotating around 3 axes. Firstly, it was tumbling end over end. Secondly, it was rolling. And then another thing was that the rolling stroke tumbling went through a cycle of what was it? Changes in angle, the same way that the Earth does over the course of the year. Through the seasons, it wobbles. So Oumuamua had all those things. It was made of iron. It was very, very long and thin. Now, the long thin thing is very interesting because all the pictures, like the one you're looking at now of Oumuamua, show it distinctly long and thin, making it. But look at it; it's all craggy, it's rocky. It looks like a natural object. And critics of the artists who created these kinds of images have rudely christened this the turd picture. But for all we know, it might look like the monolith in Arthur C. Clarke and Stanley Kubrick's 2001, the Space Odyssey film and book. And we don't know that it looks like this. This image, this artist's impression, is not based on any actual observations. The best image we can get of Oumuamua is from the Hubble Space Telescope, and even then it's like a big orange dot. The only reason that we know that it's long and thin is because when we observe its rotational cycle, it varies an awful lot in brightness. That's how we know it has this profile. But it could be smooth, it could be sharp edged, it could be obviously artificial for all we know. This turd picture is based on an assumption that it is a natural object, and this is why NASA and Space.com and everyone else has lapped this up. Now, since I made the live stream, Oumuamua then came back into the news. It came back into the news not with some new information, because I did say at the time that Oumuamua was changing velocity, as it would if it was it had some kind of propulsion system, which would make it some kind of spacecraft, and I explained why it was unlikely to be comet outgassing. But in October 2018, this is why it came back into the news, by the way. There was a publication, an absolutely astonishing paper from the Harvard Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, and it was by Professor Abraham Loeb. Now, he suggested that the object was artificial and it was changing its trajectory with a propulsion system that it had not used previously, because somebody had suggested that this was pressure from solar wind was making it do this, which again would beg the question, why didn't that happen when it was closer to the sun? Why did it just suddenly kick off when it was past the orbit of Jupiter, when it was freezing cold and it was much further away from the sun? Loeb suggested that the engine might actually be a light sail. Now, a light sail is a method of manoeuvring spacecraft around in space. Now, this has never been built, it's just proposed at the moment, but it probably would work. And it's remarkable because it uses solar wind in the same way that a sailing ship uses the atmospheric wind. It basically, you put out this big flat surface, and solar wind, which is these charged particles, push against it, and that pushes the spacecraft along. It propels the spacecraft along. Now, acceleration from a solar sail is very slow. It would basically, you'd unfurl it, and it would take like about, I think it's just a tiny amount per second. Arthur C. Clarke wrote a story about this called Sunjammer, where it's a race of solar craft, and when the gun goes bang and the spacecraft start off, it takes them like they move an inch forward, but they slowly gather speed. Now, in space, that's perfectly fine, because it doesn't matter how slowly you accelerate, because all progress is accumulative. By that I mean you don't have to worry about it slowing down because it hits some kind of friction, because it's in a vacuum. And there's talk about how some spacecraft, the interstellar medium would act like would cause friction on the spacecraft, so that some spacecraft might actually have to be streamlined, and they might have to have some kind of protection because of this. But that's only when you get up to like the 10%, 50% speed of light that becomes a problem. But anyway, what happens is the acceleration is slow, but it is cumulative. And so this makes it very practical for a spacecraft, because unlike a rocket, there's no need for the craft to carry fuel. So unless you're in a hurry to get somewhere, this is the perfect way of travelling across space. That is leaving aside what we know about the secret space program, free energy and anti-gravity and stuff like that. But Loeb said this. He said, "We explain the excess acceleration of Oumuamua away from the sun as the result of the force that the sunlight exerts on its surface. For this force to explain measured excess acceleration, the object needs to be extremely thin. of order of a fraction of a millimetre in thickness, but tens of metres in size. This makes the object lightweight for its surface area and allows it to act as a light sail. Its origin could be either natural, in the interstellar medium, or protoplanetary disks, or artificial. Yes, he did say that. Artificial. As a probe sent for a reconnaissance mission into the inner regions of the solar system. My goodness me. This isn't outgassing, this is someone hitting the gas. I must say, I want to take a moment to congratulate Professor Loeb, and I just hope that the response he gets from his peers is not too damaging to his career or his social position, because Dr. John Mack talked about when he brought up the idea of alien abduction, he was turned into he was basically ostracized. And as psychological studies have shown, ostracizing has the same result as torture on the mind. He walked into a dining room, people would get up and walk out. They hated him for that. So if Oumuamua is accelerating now, and I must point, by the time this video is uploaded, which is the beginning of January 2019, it's about to pass the orbit of Saturn. It's going very fast. It's gone from the orbit of Jupiter to the orbit of Saturn in less than a year. It's passed the orbit of Jupiter in May. That's very, very fast it's travelling. If Oumuamua is accelerating now when it didn't before, this might mean that it was in some kind of inert state as it swung around the Sun and past the Earth. So it might actually have been in this kind of inert state. And indeed, Rendezvous with Rama, which I talk about in the live stream, the book by Arthur C. Clarke, the spacecraft in that is exactly the same. It is in an inert state. It kind of comes to life as it gets near the Sun. In this case, Oumuamua has come to life when it's moving away from the Sun. Now, it was actually the Breakthrough Listen project, which I talked about in the live stream, which was done in December 2017, and it received only negative results, was done when the object was behaving as a natural object. And indeed, apart from its strange shape and things like that, as it did pass through the inner solar system, it acted exactly as a natural object would, something without any propulsion. It didn't even behave like a comet. And of course, the negative results, which I talked about in the live stream, and I said during the live stream that they should actually do that radio survey again, because it may be that it's been into it's gone into some kind of it was in some kind of sleep mode. I don't know. We don't know how these objects work. If it truly is an interstellar object from another civilization, we don't know how it works. But we know that our own probes can go into sort of sleep mode. For example, the Philae probe that landed on the comet 67P Chernyurov-Gerasimenko. Sorry if I mispronounced that. Shirt gauge. I'm not going to go there. So what I'm saying is, if Oumuamua is now moving again, as I said it during the live stream, now would be a good time to carry out that radio survey again. And I wrote to Yuri Milner and these people, and I said, I did send them an email, just one. I don't want to just bother them, but I did suggest that they carry out this radio survey again. They find some way to do it, to see if now it is releasing some kind of transmission. And what's more, you're not going to believe this, there are potentially 4 more Oumuamuas. It could be, yeah. Here is the headline. Astronomers are tracking 4 potential interstellar objects that are now in our solar system. Oh my god, we're being invaded! And it's Loeb again who's behind this. Using detailed computer models of asteroidal-type objects between the Sun and Jupiter, 2 scientists from the Harvard-Smithsonian Institute for Astrophysics have found that at least 4 known objects are likely to have origins from outside our solar system. After becoming gravitationally trapped, the 4 potentially interstellar objects are thought to spend most of their time between the orbits of Jupiter and Neptune. However, during their closest approaches to the Sun, they do pass through Earth's neighbourhood. This was a paper submitted to the monthly notices of the Royal Astronomical Society by Abraham Loeb, aforementioned, and also Amir Siraj, his colleague, to compare the orbital characteristics of theoretical high-inclination objects to those of the Centaurs. That's the most popular known, the most similar population of known asteroids. And one of them said, we should find that there should be hundreds of Oumuamua-sized interstellar objects identifiable by Centaur-like objects. 127U1 Oumuamua is the first bona fide interstellar object. But the authors note that there should be at least 66 possible other interstellar objects in their calculations, ranging in diameter from roughly 100 meters to 10 kilometers in size. My goodness, you're getting up to, I remember in the Rendezvous with Rama, the object I think was 33 miles long, something like that. Anyway, all these potential interstellar interlopers should be detectable by the LLST, a large synoptic survey telescope currently under construction in Chile. The Sun-Jupiter system acts as a fishing net that collects interstellar objects. At any given time, there are a few thousand trapped objects within the solar system. So this is an awful lot of interstellar objects that are out there. Now they've found one of them. Now, obviously, not all of them are going to be spaceships. Some of them will just be stray planetoids that have wandered into the solar system. I don't deny that. But if one of them starts behaving oddly, the way that Oumuamua is, that is not obeying Kepler's laws in its rotation through its orbit, it could be a sign there is another strange spacecraft out there. How about that? Yeah, so I've got a feeling that 2019, UFO Disclosure 2019, may come about. If there is a UFO Disclosure 2019, it may come about through the revelation of either from Oumuamua or from one of these other strange objects that there is basic spacecraft in our solar system. We'll have to wait and see, but this is exciting. It really is. Now this is utter crap. It really is. There's no other word for it. Oh my goodness. Has the mystery of Britain's Roswell finally been solved? Rendlesham Forest UFO landing was a prank SAS tricksters played on US airmen, insiders claim. This is an article that's just been released. Rendlesham Forest incident in Suffolk has intrigued UFO enthusiasts since 1980. I hate the way they say enthusiasts. Military personnel said they saw lights flying in the woods. In December that year, the group was largely convinced they had witnessed an alien spacecraft, yet now it has been claimed that the extraterrestrial sighting was a hoax yet again. Oh, goodness me. And you see, this claim, every so often they come up with a new reason why it's a hoax, and this is the latest. Now have a listen to this. Dubbed Britain's Roswell, the Rendlesham Forest incident in Suffolk has intrigued, here we go, UFO enthusiasts, just to repeat that line before. On 3 separate nights, just before New Year, military personnel said they saw lights flying in the sky and descending into the woodland. The group was convinced they had seen an alien spacecraft. Yet it has now been claimed that the extraterrestrial sighting was a hoax played on the US Air Force by the SAS in revenge for capturing a squad and subjecting them to a brutal interrogation. The SAS, Special Air Service, it's British Special Forces. The SAS was said to have regularly tested US security by probing the perimeters of RAF Woodbridge in the English country, which allegedly stored nuclear warheads and was believed to be a key target for Soviet agents. When an SAS troop parachuted into the complex one night in August 1980, they were unaware the guards had upgraded their radar system. Their black parachutes were immediately detected and the British were hauled off for questioning. They claimed they were beaten up by their captors, who refused to believe who they were and repeatedly referred to as unidentified aliens before being released 18 hours later after the British authorities intervened. Right. Seething from the interrogation, SAS soldiers were keen to take revenge. The British X-Files expert Dr. David Clarke, good grief, he's come up. Watch my Skeptics video for more information on him. Yeah, Dr. David Clarke, who has been researching the story for 3 years, revealed, after their initial release, the troopers made no complaint at their rough treatment, but were determined to get their own back on the US Air Force for the beating they had received. In particular, their repeated characterization as aliens sowed the seeds of a plan. They said, "They called us aliens, right? We'll show them what aliens really look like." As December approached, lights and coloured flares were rigged in Rendlesham Forest. Black helium balloons were also coupled to remote-control kites to carry suspended materials into the air, activated by radio controls. Taking place over 3 nights between the 26th and 28th of December in 1980, military personnel from nearby RAF Woodbridge and RAF Bentwaters witnessed strange lights in the woods and hovering above their air bases, which were on high alert as the Cold War was at its peak. A great deal of nocturnal Christmas fun was had at the expense of the US Air Force, and the matter should have ended there, according to a letter written to Dr. Clark by an alleged SAS source. Unfortunately, a senior US officer, Lieutenant Colonel Holt, led the US contingent out into the forest on the second night and took along his tape recorder. The hovering and whizzing lights were sufficiently impressive for him to send a report to the MOD. Someone in London recalled the events of the previous August, and questions were asked. A few red faces, but also some satisfaction and amusement followed. The US Air Force was reassured at a very senior level, and no UK investigation was undertaken for obvious reasons. Dr. Clark said he was first contacted 3 years ago by Frank, as his name was, who claimed to be an SAS insider. He had seen Dr. Clark talking about Rendlesham on TV in a documentary and felt it was about time that the truth was revealed about the incident. Dr. Clark of the Centre for Contemporary Legend at Sheffield Hallam University said, "I investigated his incredible story by talking to trusted and open sources in the British military, including some high-profile former SAS troopers. What happened in the forest, according to Frank, would be the bread and butter for special operations soldiers trained to deceive and misinform while remaining invisible." Well, right. So, yeah, I've had a look at the blog. I mean, on the blog, Dr. David Clark's blog, there's a list of some of the people he's interviewed who were not directly involved in this, but claim that it was part and parcel of what they used to do. I'm a bit dubious about whether such a prank could be tolerated on a base where allegedly a certain kind of ordnance was stored, which no one will admit was there, and also the risk of dealing with men with live rounds, so with live ammunition in their weapons, who were trained to repel invaders. Now, these were always going to be Spetsnaz. These are like Russian special forces on hang gliders or parachutes coming into the base. That's what they were trained to deal with. But if they see black parachutes and black people clad in black storming the base, they're not going to stop to check their nationality. They're going to open fire, and people could really get killed in events like this. Special forces troops are very expensive and they're very valuable. I mean, I'm a bit dubious that something like this would ever get done. I mean, I have very little experience in the military. As I said before, I was 4 months in Royal Navy training, but I talked to a couple of other people who were in for much longer, and this would be out of the question. Absolutely out of the question. I think they're a bit scared. I think they're scared of something that is coming, something coming very soon. It's this upcoming film here, Capel Green. This is a new film about the Rendlesham Forest incident, which is going to shed a massive amount of light on what actually happened during that incident. It's got new evidence, polygraph tests, new documents, things like that, and it's going to be quite explosive. The Rendlesham Forest incident is not over. The case is not closed. This film is well and truly throwing it wide open again, and I'll say more about that nearer the time of its release in May, because I'm very closely involved in this and I'm very much looking forward to it. And I think the government are doing what they always do. They're trying to backfill everything and get their disinformation in first before this film hits the screens, big and small. This is one to watch. I'll be saying more about this closer to the time, as I've said, but it is one to watch. Capel Green. Look it up. Look at the trailers on YouTube. It's coming soon. It's going to be great. It's going to be explosive, and it's going to be earth-shatteringly revelatory. Now, I want to read you something that Stephen Bassett has just said, what he's just sent. There was this press release here from the Paradigm Research Group. Washington, D.C., political activist organisation Paradigm Research Group has released a report addressing the nation's current political status in relation to certain recent and historical developments. These include extraordinary statements made by Secretary Hillary Clinton and her political team during the 2016 election campaign, and the launch in 2017 of an organisation composed of former members of the CIA, DIA and DOD. That of course means the TTSA. Disclosure Status Report, The Way Forward, #CaretakerGov. Disclosure is an event, the formal acknowledgement by heads of state of nations of an extraterrestrial presence engaging the human race. The truth embargo is the refusal of governments, particularly the United States, to make such an acknowledgement. This embargo is entering its 8th decade. The activist effort to end the truth embargo is an exopolitical movement, quote unquote. Exopolitics occurs when extraterrestrial presence related to issues cross paths with traditional politics. This has happened on numerous occasions since 1947, usually resulting in suppression of the disclosure process. However, since 2001, the intersection between traditional politics and exopolitics has intensified. Here are some examples. 1947, a quickly executed political decision by President Truman to reverse the announcement out of Roswell Army Airfield of a recovered saucer, quote unquote, literally prevented disclosure from taking place in 1947. And of course, my books go into that in more detail and about what would have happened. Sorry, this isn't the. So I should point out, this is just my commentary now. My books, Roswell Rising and the subsequent sequels, are all about what would have happened if that reversal of announcement had not taken place. 1953. Subsequent to the CIA Robertson panel, President Eisenhower signed off on committing significant resources to formalizing the truth embargo. 1958. The National Aeronautics and Space Act created a civilian agency to create NASA must assign all and any matters impacting national security to the Department of Defense. This protected the truth embargo from any NASA extraterrestrial related findings. 1966, the US House of Representatives Armed Services Committee hearing on identified flying saucers was held in service to a powerful politician, House Minority Leader and later President Gerald Ford. Brackets, much like the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program was created in 2007 in service to a powerful politician, Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, close brackets. Witnesses were limited to 3 members of the Air Force. The hearing was conducted to serve the truth embargo. 1968, US House of Representatives Committee on Science and Astronautics Unidentified Flying Objects Symposium. Blimey, I'd like to have attended that. That was my commentary. Back to the text. Was held in response to growing public pressure and was part of a complex process intended to pull the government out of the UFO issue. This included the soon-to-be-released Condon Committee report, the shutting down of Project Blue Book, and the dismantling of the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, NICAP. 1977. President Carter attempted to engage the extraterrestrial presence by initiating a White House study. The military-industrial complex made a political decision to thwart this study. First to refuse to cooperate was CIA Director George H.W. Bush, who's just kicked the bucket. Back to the text. Eventually, a report titled The UFO Enigma was written by Marcia S. Smith and delivered to President Carter. 1987. President Ronald Reagan raises the prospect of an alien threat in an address to the United Nations. This reference is made on several other occasions and is thought to be tied to the failed Strategic Defense Initiative, SDI, known as Star Wars, implying another basis for SDI. 1947 to 1991. A matrix of political decisions by several countries led to the Cold War and nuclear arms race, which set the truth embargo in stone for 44 years. 1993, President Bill Clinton's administration was drawn into the extraterrestrial presence issued by Lawrence Rockefeller. This was the most positive extra-political development up to that time. Political decisions were made by the Air Force and the Department of Defense to block Clinton and the Rockefeller Initiative, which was closed down for political reasons. Just prior to the 1996 election. 2001, the Disclosure Project held a major press conference in the main ballroom of the National Press Club on May the 9th, 2001. Testimony from dozens of witnesses was presented in person and on video. Significant momentum was developing around the activist movement. This abruptly ended with the events of September 11th, 2001. Yep, and I talked about that in my History of Exopolitics film. That's my commentary. Back to the text. And the subsequent political decisions to enter into a series of wars in the Middle East. 1967 to 2010. A national security-based political decision was made to ignore and deny evidence and testimony regarding perhaps the most significant and telling events for an extraterrestrial presence, nuclear weapons tampering in the presence of anti-gravitic craft of unknown origin. 2013. 12 years to the month after the 2001 Disclosure press conference, the Paradigm Research Group produced a mock congressional hearing, the Citizen Hearing on Disclosure, in the main ballroom of the National Press Club from April the 29th to May the 3rd. I know, I watched it very carefully. That's my commentary, back to the text. 6 former members of Congress heard 30 hours of testimony from 42 witnesses over 5 days. 2014. The Paradigm Research Group launched a political initiative targeting presidential candidate Secretary Hillary Clinton and her connection to the extraterrestrial presence issue, going back to the Rockefeller Initiative. Hundreds of mainstream media print articles were generated forcing the Clinton presidential team, brackets, Secretary Clinton, President Clinton, John Podesta and President Obama, close brackets, to address the extraterrestrial issues a dozen times during the campaign. Paradigm Research Group was convinced and elected Hillary Clinton fully intended to be the Disclosure president soon after taking office. And my commentary again. I made a video called UFO Disclosure, What About Trump? And that I covered this whole issue there. Back to the text. This prospect ended with the election outcome. 2017. The To the Stars of Arts and Science To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science, TTSAAS, was formally announced on October the 11th. This very significant project was developed during 2015-16 and likely scheduled for launch just prior to or just after the 2016 election. The election outcome required some reorganisation and a new timeline. The launch was quickly followed by 2 major stories in the New York Times on December the 16th, 2017. My commentary. That was the announcement of the footage and the announcement of the other things that came from the Pentagon. Back to the text. 2018. As of this white paper, the disclosure movement has been significantly hampered for 2 years by the national political status, a constitutional crisis. Further progress to end the truth embargo will be limited until this crisis is resolved. What next? A caretaker government and disclosure? The era of the UFO, quote-unquote, is over. The concept of disclosure has now spread worldwide and people are excited and expectant. When will it happen? What is the current status? Yes, I'm one of them. That's my commentary. Back to the text. At this time, the nation is in the throes of a constitutional crisis that has forced many projects and initiatives into the background. Media coverage of extraterrestrial presence issues have fallen off substantially. The activist movement has been slow to a crawl, and this will not change until this crisis has passed. The following is a political, non-partisan assessment of how and when the ongoing constitutional crisis will end and what that means for disclosure. Think of the current dilemma as a complex differential equation. These are equations that can have several solutions, in which one may be the most useful. Right now, the political leadership is trying to resolve such an equation, and this assessment projects the solution they will choose. The nation's political institutions and processes are dysfunctional. Dysfunctional. Just a little note, the repeat of dysfunctional was my emphasis. Back to the text. But the political leadership is not stupid or suicidal. They will select the path forward that does the minimum damage to careers, legacies, fundraising and their parties. Some will even take into consideration the nation and the American people. There are a limited number of options, and each will generate considerable carnage. However, one stands well above the rest regarding minimal downsize, maximum upsize. Call it the caretaker government option. Hashtag caretakergov. The Paradigm Research Group believes that this is the solution to the present constitutional crisis the political leadership will select. It would unfold as follows. The Democrats will take control of the House of Representatives on January the 3rd, 2019. The Senate outcome will not be a factor. My commentary. The Democrats actually have gained a small majority in the House of Representatives, which is normal for midterm elections. The Senate is still firmly in the hands of the Republicans and therefore Trump. Back to the text. Anticipating the special prosecutor reports, indictments, trials and convictions, plus years of House committee hearings, the Republican leadership will persuade the president to resign sometime between November the 7th and January the 3rd, 2019. I think, my commentary again, I think Steve means November the 7th, 2018 to January the 3rd, 2019. Back to the text. The current vice president will become president, and the House and Senate will elect a new vice president via Section 2 of the 25th Amendment. Under prior agreement, that may or may not have been made public. The new president will also resign. The new vice president will move up to the presidency, and another vice president will be elected by the House and Senate via Section 2 of the 25th Amendment. The new president and vice president will agree not to run for national office in 2020, after which this restriction will be lifted. They will have been selected on the bipartisan basis and have considerable experience and positive approval ratings. Okay, just a break for some commentary. The 25th Amendment to the United States Constitution says that if the president becomes unable to do their job, the vice president becomes president, which would mean Mike Pence in this situation. Although Steve is suggesting this goes one step further and that the vice president then resigns, and basically the legislative branch of the US government then selects a new executive. This can happen for a short while if the president is sick or disabled, and I remember that when old Bushy was in hospital having an operation, was it the vice president became president? I think it was Bush Senior, so I think it was whoever his vice president was, became president for the half an hour or so he was under the anaesthetic. So that's basically what's been suggested here. It's basically a replacement of the entire executive with somebody new in the rather complex situation, the complex position, which is the nature of the US government, which is far more complex than the UK government, where there is no elected head of government. It's simply the leader of the governing party in Parliament. So we carry on. As of January the 3rd, 2019, the nation would essentially have a caretaker government for the next 2 years. There would be time to reset normal order, institute a range of reforms, bolster the security of the election process, increase public trust, re-establish bipartisan engagement, and conduct a constructive national election campaign in 2020. This option would minimise damage to the careers and legacies of all principals and minimise the number of lengths of investigations and congressional hearings. Lastly, these are other options, and each of them would result in a political bloodbath, the likes of which the nation has not seen in the modern era. Why does the Paradigm Research Group bother to make and publish this assessment? The caretaker government status described would be the ideal scenario wherein a US president would disclose the extraterrestrial presence to the American people and the world, with less partisan executives in office, not running in the next election. The political legacy would be spread across party lines and involve more principles. The American people would have time to consider a new extraordinary worldview and factor that into their voting decisions in 2020. If the caretaker government scenario comes to pass, expect the TTSA and Paradigm Research Group to become more aggressive in early 2019. The TTSA will likely release significant and new information, and additional former members of the military intelligence complex may come forward. My commentary now. What Steve is suggesting here is that somehow the current political situation is the force that's holding back the TTSA from releasing more information, although, as you've heard, there may be other reasons for the failure or the stagnation of the TTSA. Back to the text. The truth embargo will collapse and disclosure could take place in 2019. Those who support the disclosure process and resonate with the above assessment are invited to share it via social media for vigorous discussion and use the hashtag #CaretakerGov. Stephen Bassett, Executive Director, Paradigm Research Group. Right. Now, this all goes back to Steve's opinion on President Trump. He uses the phrase political crisis. Now, he doesn't actually define exactly what the political crisis is, other than what I've discussed in previous episodes in this series, which is that Hillary Clinton did not become US President, and Donald Trump did instead, when Steve had banked on Hillary becoming the President because she was to be the disclosure President because of the Rockefeller Initiative and other things. And that didn't happen. Now, Steve is a huge, is a very harsh critic of President Trump, and indeed he's joined by other people within the ex-political movement, such as Grant Cameron. And he's basically, there was a massive lament on the behalf of both Steve and Grant after the 2016 election outcome. This is something that I covered in a previous Oumuamua TV film on the UFO Disclosure series. I also interviewed Steve on Oumuamua Radio, in which he actually said he was in a blue funk basically after this happened. Now, if you watch the relevant episodes of this series, there's the films. I think it's UFO Disclosure 2016 or 2017. What about Trump? I can't remember which one it is. You'll see that I don't share Steve's pessimism about President Trump. Steve Bassett is a man I respect enormously, and I've worked with him closely. I like the man. I think he can do an enormous amount of good. But I disagree with him fundamentally on certain things, and this is one of them. As I explain in that particular video, and I'm not going to repeat every point I made, you can go and watch it. I'm not going to put links in the description box. You can find out for yourself where to go, simply by using the search function. But the election of Trump was a massive blow to the agenda, which is part of the truth embargo, or the truth embargo is part of that agenda. That is what's known as the deep state, the Illuminati, whatever you choose to call them. And I said from the outset, indeed Linda Moulton Howe made this point, and I actually covered this in a previous video, and I can't remember. I'm sorry, I can't remember all these videos. I just made so many of them. Use the search function, find them. Oh God! But Linda Moulton Howe said something, came out with this amazing statement she'd read, which indicates that Trump is actually the guy who's actually trying to get disclosure, and it's forces within the deep state who are stopping him. And Michael Salla made this point. Watch my Hawaiian missile attack live stream. So here I think Steve may have got the wrong end of the stick when it comes to Trump. And what he's suggesting here essentially is, I won't call it a coup d'etat because it is in line with the US Constitution. Indeed, the president can be removed under the 25th Amendment, if you look at the Wikipedia page, which I just read a small section of. But what he's suggesting is very radical moves to resolve what he believes is a constitutional crisis, when I don't actually believe it is that kind of crisis. And Steve really hasn't. Steve did explain his position on Trump, and he knows I think differently to him. But it's by definition, you can't call this a constitutional crisis simply because somebody won the election who you don't like. That's called being on the wrong end of a democratic decision. This is what I've said to the bloody Ramonas, and they're the ones who won't. People like Richard Dawkins who won't shut up about, oh, we should forget the referendum and stay in the EU and things like that. Horrible little twat. Just watch my video, Richard Dawkins patronising Git. There's another piece of evidence I want to mention, and I know that not everyone watching this video will agree with me on this, and in fact Steve Bassett will probably be tearing what little hair he has left on his head out as he listens to what I'm about to say. But the QAnon phenomenon has really been taking off recently, and in fact Q, whoever or whatever he or she is, if they even exist, has been stating on the 8chan board, that's on the politics board, the poll board, I think it's called poll. Well, that's on 4chan, but it's the equivalent of the poll board on 8chan, which was on 4chan. That they have he has like a QAnon and answer section, if you know what I mean. And there was this very, very interesting session led. One of the 8chaners was actually asked him several questions. I mean, forget the moon landing thing at the top. The important thing is the bottom here. Are we alone? Question mark. Roswell? Question mark. And Q responds thus: no. Highest classification. Consider the vastness of space. Now, I know what some of you are going to say. Q is a hoax. It's a fraud. It's a bunch of LARPers just messing around on the chans. They're just taking you for a ride. And I know this because my good friend Kev Baker, I mean, he is he's convinced it's a scam. I know there's other people like the Aslans Raw and people like that who are convinced that Q is real. I've listened to both sides of the story. I don't know for certain, but I do think there's some reality behind Q. I do. And Q essentially here is confirming the Roswell incident. He's saying that the Roswell incident is real. Now, if the Roswell incident is real, this is essentially, well, look, I mean, the words could be interpreted in several means, but highest classification, consider the vastness of space. The question of specifically said Roswell question mark. And Q said no, basically we're not alone. Now, if Q really is who people say he is, that he's someone close to Trump, or some people have claimed that Q actually might be Trump himself. This means that is a disclosure. Now the good news is, if I'm wrong about QAnon, and if all the other people at Aslan's Raw and people like that are wrong about QAnon, we will soon know, because Q has made specific predictions about the outcomes. For instance, the storm is coming, etc., etc. And if the storm doesn't come, then Q is fake, right? So we'll know. So this is a falsifiable hypothesis. So I'd ask people, Steve Bassett and everyone else, before you are completely devoid of follicles, do bear that in mind. This is a falsifiable hypothesis, and if I'm wrong, it'll become clear that I'm wrong, and we will know. But to go into what I'm basically saying, this is not just QAnon that makes me think that Trump might be the disclosure president. It's not just QAnon. It's other things as well that he's said and done. It's his position. It's the fact that he is an anti-establishment, non-establishment candidate. He's an independent, etc., etc., is what leads me to believe that Trump actually might be the best thing for disclosure that has ever happened. I don't know this. I don't, but I think it might be. And if you go to UFO Disclosure, what about Trump, you'll see more details there. So I'm sorry, Steve, but I think you got it wrong on this one. And if I'm wrong, I will admit I'm wrong, and you can say I told you so, in which case I'll accept that. But the idea of a caretaker government, which is this 25th Amendment thing, I mean, caretaker, these things are very often very destructive. I mean, for example, the provisional government in the Soviet Union was led in the end to the Bolshevik Revolution, and I mean, I've done an entire radio show on that to mark the 100th anniversary of the Bolshevik Revolution. There's been several other examples. Caretaker governments are dangerous. They are playing with fire. They can result in civil war, and they must be taken. They must be only engaged in with great caution. Anyway, Steve has suggested the 3rd of January. Well, that's just 2 days away, so well, there'll be an update pretty soon on Oumuamua TV if indeed we do end up with a caretaker government.
So there you have it. The question remains unanswered, but the question is still there. There's something else I've got to talk to you about, something which many of you have asked me about, and perhaps I should comment on, and I've been meaning to. I did promise I would. And what it is, a few months ago I made a video entitled Probe 2018, which is when I went to the Probe conference, and in doing so I included this little clip. Hospital Partners, Pride and Dignity, Stop the New World Order, welcome to Oumuamua TV. And I'm here, this is Digbeth, Birmingham, the heart of the Irish quarter here in Birmingham. You've just seen all the Irish stuff around me. And I'm just on my way to the Probe conference. I just need to make a very short video. Just stop quickly and make a very short video, because I've got to make a very important announcement to all of you, and that is, it's official, there's no further doubt, I am an alien trapped in a human body. After you watched that, a lot of you viewers got in touch with me and said, Ben, what do you mean you're an alien? What are you talking about? You know, are you A, B and C? Are you a grey? Are you something like that? Well, obviously I don't look like an alien, unlike Russell behind me, who does very much look like an alien, don't you, Russell? And I didn't want to culturally appropriate any of Russell's alienness. So obviously I'm not that kind of alien. Now, And obviously there are strange things about me. I talked before about the implant I've got in my arm. I did it on my various videos. I've done that on more than one video now. But what it is, and I think the reason I made that little clip is because even if I'm not biologically an alien, I sometimes feel like an alien. I feel I'm different from what I would call normal human behaviour. Like, not in terms of our physical shape, because obviously you look at me, you can see I'm human. I do look like a human being. But in terms of behaviour, like I say, in terms of the way I think and feel and act, I think that is why I feel very, very different to most other people in the world. Which leads me to believe that maybe even if I'm human in form, I'm not human in soul and in psychology. And the reason I made that at that particular time is because of I think it's because of the troll crisis. It's now, I actually suggested on my special New Year Oumuamua TV show on New Year's Eve evening that 2018 could be called the year of the troll, because the troll movement, and I think we should start calling it that, the troll movement, because that is what it is, has gained enormous force. It's gained enormous power. It has become almost the central, pivotal activity of the ufological community, and indeed the conspiratorial community beyond it. And it's come from it's been a multi-sided attack on me, because I've been caught up in the centre of this. Indeed, you could say I chose that, and I did, because I chose to make a stand on matters concerning certain people who were being treated unfairly, and as a result I myself was treated unfairly. And literally there are 3 or 4 scenarios where that applies. It's like it all seemed to happen at once, from completely independent situations, all came at once. It was really, really weird. It was spooky. It was very, very dismaying. And I remember thinking to myself, why are they doing that? Why are people doing this? The troll movement. It consists of people who are biologically human like me, who appear to be biologically human. So why are they doing something that I would consider unthinkable? I would never even consider doing anything like that to my worst enemy, let alone just a random stranger or someone random that I know vaguely. And the answer has to be, I don't know. And if it is so contrary to my own considered behaviour, then the solution has to be that I am not fundamentally the same biological entity as the biological entities would do that. What I'm saying is that it could be that different species are not just based on physical appearance, as we find with biology, that species are generally designated because of appearances, because of physical form, because of anatomy. Humans are different from cats because cats are furry things with tails and pointed ears that chase mice and things like that. So that's what makes humans different from cats. It's simply our physical form. And maybe the same goes for aliens. But it could be, what if, for example, a cat had a human soul, or a human had a cat's soul? Do you see what I mean? Would the cat still be a cat, and would the human still be a human? Or would the human appear to be human and simply run around chasing mice all day and meowing and drinking milk? And that cat would sit there looking very frustrated because it was being unable to speak, wouldn't be able to communicate with its fellow humans, even though it had human thoughts and feelings inside its head, and was unable to speak, and just couldn't get on with other cats because all they go around is chasing mice and drinking milk, and that would just bore this human-souled cat. Do you see what I mean? So maybe we shouldn't simply speciate life forms on physical anatomy alone. Maybe there's more to it than that. And that same goes for life forms not of this earth. So it could be that a Russell behind me actually has more in common with me than organisms of a similar physical form. And I get this from contactees and abductees all the time. They say, especially if you study researchers such as Mary Rodwell, who's very, very good, and Suzanne Hansen and people like that, they actually say that the people they deal with say, I don't feel I'm human. I feel more at home with these creatures on these ships than I do on walking on the surface of the earth with other humans. I feel I'm more a part of them than I am of this world. And that's what I mean. Now, the funny thing is, I don't have any memories that would lead me to think I'm some kind of contactee. None. I don't have any memories of being abducted. I don't have any memories of being taken up by little green things like Russell, or any other strange creatures such as mantids and Nordics and all the ones that Simon Parkes talks about, all the ones that other abductees talk about. I don't have no memory of encounters with these beings. At the same time, I have an object in my left arm, and I don't know how it got there. I have no memory of any experience would lead me to believe that had been placed inside me. So how did it get there? See? It's possible there are things in my life I don't remember. Unless, I mean, the only other explanation is that I'm just weird. I'm sort of like inhuman. I have an inhuman psychology, which is another explanation, I confess. So I'm not an alien. I'm just a human with a very warped psychology. Because, unfortunately, I mean, the sad fact is, and this is something I've had to deal with in the last 3 years, the troll movement and its various hangers-on and orbiters and sort of supporters is not just, people say it's a small fringe group. No, it's not. It's the majority. It is the majority. And that's something very difficult I've had to deal with, because you see, I know how bad people can be. When I became a hospital porter, I learned very quickly what humans are capable of doing to other humans. Because of course people end up in hospital who are the victims of violence, violence of all kinds, whether it be criminal violence or warfare or other things. So I know what people are capable of doing to each other, and I know what this evil side that exists in our species. But I had no idea that it was so prevalent, to the point where the majority of people will either actively get involved in it or will tacitly tolerate it and pay lip service to it. As I've said in previous videos, that's something I only found out in the last 3 years, and it's been an enormously dismaying. That's why I think I'm the one who's abnormal, not the rest of them. You see, it's like the Milgram experiment. I talked about the Milgram experiment on one of the live streams. It's Stanley Milgram actually. He reckoned only about a small minority of people would be willing to press the red button. That is the one which killed the person they thought they were killing. I'm not going to explain the whole thing again. Just look at my live stream. I think it was the last one I did on Bob Lazar. It's somewhere on that video. The recording's on my channel. He reckoned only a minority of people would be willing to push the red button, but it turns out almost everybody was. I can't remember the actual figures. I think it was more than 3/4 of people were willing to push the red button. So basically what I'm saying is, most people in the world are pseudo-psychopaths. Now, I've done my video on psychopaths. My video Centaur is one where I talk about psychopathy and psychopaths. Now, they say it's only a minority of people, that's 6% of people are actually psychopaths, and there's that book 6% by Andrei Lubachevsky, which you can get on sot.net, and indeed Lubachevsky and other people such as Laura Knight-Jadczyk and all the other people at sot.net, they've done a very, very good job researching this, an extremely good job, and they said 6% of people are psychopaths. It's a minority, but Probably another 80% on top of that are pseudo-psychopaths. By pseudo-psychopaths I mean, and I explain it in my Centaur video, I'm not going to put a link in the description box to that, there's enough links as it is. By that I mean people who are not psychopaths but behave as if they are, through social pressure, through the belief that it's the correct way to behave in society. Psychopathy is the correct way to behave in society. Possibly because we live in this world of political ponerology, to quote Lubachevsky, that the elite themselves are psychopaths. Maybe they are, maybe they're these organic portals that Amitabh Stanford talks about, or the reptilians that David Icke talks about, or there's all kinds of other words to deal with this, and I deal with it in more detail in my Centaur video. But that would make people who are non-psychopaths and non-pseudo-psychopaths oddities. It means that people like me are a minority, and we are abnormal. That's the point I'm making. And I wrote an article called "Being an Empath," and that was I was on Panama Voice. Again, I'm not putting a link to that. You can find it. Okay, so that's my explanation of what I meant when I said I'm an alien. Okay, I hope that satisfies you. I'm sorry it's taken me this long to provide a full explanation, but I've now provided one. I've still got this lingering cough. It just won't go away. I had a cold about 3 weeks ago, and it's just like these symptoms linger. It's really annoying. Oh, slacks. Slacks on top. It's this slug that crawls through you. Oh, it's in my throat now. Oh, it's in my chest now. Now it's in my nose. I love that video where Slaxer talks about his cold. Well, my cold's not as bad as Slaxer's, but I know what he means. Now, I've given you in this video some reasons why disclosure might be imminent in 2019. But obviously, we won't know the answer until December the 21st, December the 31st, 2019. In which case, you can say, all you smart Alex who say in the chat box that I'm wasting my time can say, "Told you so, Ben. Told you so." And yeah, I'll own that. I will. If that's how it goes, you feel free to post those gloating, backslapping comments in the chat box. Sorry, in the comments box, and I'll own it. I was wrong. But if I'm right, if this is true, then, oh my goodness me, I don't think anything else will matter, will it? I mean, just, the thing about it is, it's like, I really do believe, I think Oumuamua especially is an opportunity, the Oumuamua situation. Simply because if a radiological survey of Oumuamua is repeated, and they find a signal coming from it, that is, now that it's moving, now that it's speeding up and it's changing velocity and things like that, it could be kind of coming to life, like the Rama spacecraft did in Arthur C. Clarke's story. The reason I'm saying that is that if that happens, there can be no cover-up of it. As I explained in my SETI and UFOs video, and I will put a link in the description box to that, you can't have a cover-up in astronomy. It's just impossible. The data is all above us in the sky. There are just too many telescopes, there's too many observatories, there's too many amateur hobbyists with telescopes. You can buy telescopes in the shop for a reasonable price, which means you can basically observe the sky perfectly well. You cannot silence that many people. Astronomy is the one truly democratic science, and I make that point in my live stream about Oumuamua as well. So this is why I'm hopeful, because the thing is, if they scan Oumuamua and it turns out Oumuamua is radiating radio signals, it means it is unequivocally an artificial spacecraft that does not come from Earth, that comes from a civilization beyond our solar system, and it has reached us. And there's no way anyone's going to cover that up. So in a sense, I think that's far more significant than, for example, a crash retrieval in Oxford city centre. You know, a UFO comes down in the university parks or in Mesopotamia. Because if that happens, we know, and I've told you before in my Nottinghamshire Roswell video, they'll just cover it up. It's a very, very different flow of information when it comes to crash retrievals. Crash retrievals can actually be very easily covered up. All you need is a military response, which the government have, and you need the ability to control the media, which the government can. And if you do that, then it's a piece of cake. Look how quick, how easily, and for how long they covered up Roswell, and all the other examples. Just look at Ryan Wood's book about the magic eyes only. There's 100 examples through the 20th century where they successfully covered up crash retrievals. So far, there has been no occasion where a crash retrieval has failed to be covered up. Possibly the Pentagon one might turn out to be one, because thanks to Kaz and Gary, we've got in there early with the evidence and the exposure. But that remains to be seen. However, anything that happens out in space, which is visible to astronomers, is going to be immediately public knowledge. This is why I'm hopeful. Now, if it turns out that Oumuamua is a spacecraft, you might say, well, that doesn't prove that the flying saucers that people report are real. It might just be a one-off. It might just be a one-off. Well, as you know, I don't accept that it's not possible to prove that the UFOs, the flying saucers, the flying triangles, all these other things are just that. They're just people's imagination or their deceit. I don't accept that, and I've explained why many, many times on Oumuamua TV. But Oumuamua being real will immediately make it clear that SETI was wrong, Carl Sagan was wrong, that it is perfectly possible for aliens to reach us. And if they've done it once, why should they have just done it once? What if they're here all the time? What if they arrived centuries or even millennia ago, and they've been with us ever since? These questions will inevitably come up in a scenario in which anything related to SETI, especially if it's something like Oumuamua, which is in our solar system, comes true. I mean, supposing Oumuamua is, like it explains, heading out of the solar system now, but it's changing velocities. What if it stopped to turn around and came back? No one would ever be able to say that's just a comet, that's just outgassing, that's just solar pressure, that's just all these other things. And indeed, Professor Abraham Loeb has staked his reputation on this very bravely, because there's a lot of scientists who wouldn't dare. So well done, Professor Loeb. It all remains to be seen, of course, but that, I think, is the most exciting. I think it's one of the most exciting things that's happened in the last few years. It really is. And what's more, if you read UFO Truth magazine, I've just written an article which is going to be published, which is going to be in the new edition. It's about this very thing. So please do check out UFO Truth magazine for that. So what's coming next? Well, there's more videos on the way, including, I see Steve Mumbling has been putting photons to celluloid lately. I think, Steve, we've touched a raw nerve, haven't we? And there will be a response to that. I will be responding to Steve Mumbling and all the things he said. So check out that is what's coming. I know there's an awful lot I want to say to Steve Mumbling, and I've been meaning to for months and I haven't had time. Well, I am going to now prioritise replies to Steve Mumbling on all the subjects he's been talking about recently. And what's more, there's going to be a comments reply video coming up. I'm going to do a video. I'll hopefully record as much as I can of my talk in Denmark next month. Sorry, yeah, and the beginning of next month. And any updates on Gatwick Airport that I think are significant. And there's been a few. And I've got a few other ideas. But Oumuamua TV is going to continue in 2019 with all the spirit and all the vigour and all the possible disclosure speculation that it has in 2018 and before. So please stay tuned, watch this space, subscribe, like, share and all these other things. Shut up, Ben, says Slaxer. So please just do all those things, and keep looking out for new videos, and hit the little bell button if you know, all that sort of bollocks. So once again, a very happy New Year, all of you. Hope you enjoy your New Year's Day. Hope you didn't get too drunk and didn't have a hangover. And enjoy 2019. Have a good one, whatever it is you are doing or whatever it is you're experiencing in this wonderful world called planet Earth. Whether you're alien or whether you're human. Thank you for watching Oumuamua TV. Hospital Porters, pride and dignity. Stop the New World Order.